seemed as if there were secondary, third explosions that happened, 6 or 7 that happened in a rapid succession. Makes one wonder exactly what it was that they did hit. And that's not actually the first time that the area behind that tower has been targeted in the past either. We are hearing that the Israeli forces are coming back and hitting some targets multiple times, that at times they are coming in and striking the same area more than once. And again, all of this is coming on a day where throughout the entire day there was an ongoing conversation about the possibility of a potential ceasefire, at the very least a calming down of the situation. But most certainly, as we've been seeing everything progressing throughout the night, that does not seem like it is going to be likely anytime soon.
We'll try to re-rack the video that we're rolling on at the time of the explosion and try to get that so we can show it to you as soon as possible. The multiple explosions that occurred probably within the last 10 minutes or so ago. But it's surprising. I mean, it is late at night here, but we're not hearing much of a reaction or response by first responders. We saw one ambulance heading toward the scene, but no more than that.
No, not yet at this point in time, and it is incredibly difficult, one has to imagine, for these emergency response units to spread themselves thin at this point, really trying to respond to all of the sites that have been struck. We keep seeing, messages coming out from people who are living here, talking about various different explosions happening in so many different neighborhoods. If we just look at the intensity of what happened here tonight, and we're hearing more ambulances in the distance right now, but they're job most certainly is incredibly difficult to
and Wolf, we went to the scene of a blast that occurred several hours ago, very close to where we are, and actually got there just before the first ambulance was getting there. By the time we left, there were probably about 4 or 5 ambulances which had responded. They immediately rush out with their stretchers, trying to see if there's any walking wounded, anybody that needs assistance that they can take to the hospital. But then they very quickly often have to leave the scene in order to respond to another location where a blast has occurred, Wolf.
Yeah, we're showing viewers, Anderson, some of the video from earlier when that initial explosion went off, and you obviously jumped and crawled down. It's a dangerous situation. Anderson and Arwa, I know you reported earlier that the Israelis had dropped leaflets in Beirut warning citizens to avoid some certain areas. Do either of you know if these explosions that we're now seeing are in those areas where the Israelis said to the folks, get out of these areas? Do either of you know if this area is part of that danger zone that the Israelis described?
Let me bring in Orwa because she couldn't hear your question, but the question was the area where we saw the leaflets being dropped, is this where the area where we're seeing explosions now? You went out to the area where the leaflets were being dropped.
Actually, we went to the area that people were fleeing to, but the leaflets were really being dropped off more in that general direction. The neighborhoods that people were being told to flee were more over to the north versus right here, which is very much the central part of the city at this point.
This is very close to the Islamic Bank that was hit also yesterday. I was actually out on that street earlier today just to get some shots of the bank. That bank had been hit, and the reason local people felt that bank had been hit was that is where the salaries of Hamas members is actually paid out from, that bank. So that perhaps is why it was targeted by the IDF. But again, we do not know what the target was this time. Usually the IDF puts out a statement in the wake of a bombing like this to explain what they say was the target. But clearly, multiple explosions, probably perhaps without a doubt the most dramatic explosions that we saw today, and certainly not just because it was so close to our location, but just because of the sheer number of explosions. Or we're thinking, Wolf, that some of those were secondary explosions, perhaps not all multiple rockets hitting the buildings, but perhaps something inside the buildings that caused a secondary explosion.
And again, I mean, you look at just the impact
now
of
after
that one explosion followed by. You look at just the impact of that one city it felt, and one can't help but to think that in this city, when it comes to the residents that are having to cope with this day in and day out, they actually don't have air raid sirens. They actually don't have air raid sirens. They don't have bunkers to go and hide in. We don't know what the impact was right now of that explosion, what other buildings perhaps next to the target were affected, what the target actually was. But that is what residents here say is so difficult to cope with, because even though they do get warnings on some occasions to leave, even though they have been warned not to